Welcome back to Algebra 2. Today we're in our third section of quadratic functions, and today in our third section we're going to be talking about solving quadratics by factoring. So solving quadratics by factoring. Now yesterday we solved quadratics by looking at their graphs, and that can take quite a long time to graph each quadratic. So when we solve a quadratic by factoring, what we need to know is the quadratic must equal 0, just like it did yesterday when we graphed it. And once when it equals 0, we then factor and solve. So here we have x squared minus 11x plus 30 equals 0. So we're equal to 0. So we just have to factor this trinomial. So we know it's x and x. Multiply to get 30. Add to give negative 11 is negative 5 and negative 6. So that factors to x minus 5 times x minus 6. And then here, we can use our zero product property. Our zero product property tells us that if we have two things that are multiplied together that give us 0, either A would be 0 or B would be 0 in this case. So we factored our trinomial, so now we have two things being multiplied together that gives us 0. So either the x minus 5 has to be 0 or the x minus 6 has to be 0. And we solve them. Well, if x minus 5 equals 0, adding 5 to both sides, x is 5. If x minus 6 is equal to 0, adding 6 to both sides, our x is 6. So here our solutions would be 5 and 6. Okay, let's look at the second example. This time our quadratic is 15x squared minus 8x plus 1 equals 0. So we are already equal to 0. So now we just need to split it up. Well, 1 is at the end, so it's got to be 1 and 1. And then to get 15x, we can either do 1 times 15 or 3 times 5. It's most likely going to be 3 times 5, so 3x and 5x. Minus and minus, and then you can go ahead and check that if you wish to. So 3x times 5x gives us our 15x squared. 3x times negative x is negative 3x. Negative 1 times positive 5 is a negative 3x. These two certainly combine together to give us our minus 8x, so it's factored correctly. So then from here we have two things being multiplied together to give us 0. So that means 3x minus 1 is 0, or 5x minus 1 is 0. We solve them both. So we'd add 1 here. So 3x is 1, divide by 3, so x is 1/3. Second equation, we'd add 1. So 5x is 1, divide by 5, so x is 1/5. So for this particular solution, we would have the solutions of 1/5 and 1/3. Now think about this problem when we graphed it. We would not have gotten 1/5 and 1/3. Instead, we would have had our parabola crossing in between two integers. So when we factor, we get more exact answers than what we did when we graphed. All right, next problem, x squared is equal to 64. First off, we need this to be equal to 0, so we'd subtract 64. So now we have x squared minus 64 equals 0. Then we factor it. This is a difference of squares, so x minus 8 times x plus 8. Hopefully you remember factoring from the beginning of the year. Using zero product property, this means x minus 8 should be 0, or x plus 8 should be 0. And then solving, we'd have to add 8, so x is positive 8. Over here we'd subtract 8, so x is negative 8. So your solution for this one would be negative 8 and positive 8. That is one way that you can write it. Another way that you can write it when you have a positive and a negative value of the same number is this plus or minus sign here, and then the number 8. This is telling us that we want the positive 8 value and the negative 8 value. Okay. Now we're going to do the reverse. So here, we factored and got our solutions. These problems, we are going to give you the solutions, and we have to write the quadratic. So our two solutions are 1/2 and -5. So that means x is 1/2 and x equals -5. So we work backwards. So we first want to get these equal to 0. So if x is 1/2, first I would times both sides by 2 to get rid of my denominator. So then I have 2x equals 1. Then to get it equal to 0, I'd subtract 1. So I have 2x minus 1 equals 0. So there's one of them. If x equals -5, I would add 5. So then I'd have x plus 5 equals 0. There's my other one. I have two equations now equal to 0. So now I take those two equations, x plus 5, and I multiply it by 2x minus 1. And when I multiply those two, that should still give me 0. And multiplying these two, that's just foiling or double distributing. So x times 2x is 2x squared. X times -1 is -x. 5 times 2x is plus 10x. 5 times -1 is minus 5. Combine like terms. So 2x squared plus 9x minus 5 is equal to 0. So there is our quadratic equation in standard form when we have the roots 1/2 and -5. All right, one more problem that's similar. This time we have the root -7. And what we have to keep in mind here is that when we just have one root listed, that means that we had -7 twice. So x equals -7. To get this equal to 0, we'd add 7. So it's x plus 7 equals 0. Which means both of our equations here said x plus 7 equals 0. So when we're trying to find the quadratic, we would take x plus 7 times x plus 7. And then we FOIL or double distribute. So x times x is x squared. X times 7 is 7x. 7 times x is 7x. And 7 times 7 is 49. Combining like terms together, we have x squared plus 14x plus 49 is equal to 0. So there would be our quadratic in standard form. So that is how we solve these by factoring.